practice. For many of those years, the practice had included both assessment and counseling with seminarians, priests, and religious. For the past 10 years, Dr. Ruff has been employed as the Director of Counseling Services and Assistant Director of Human Formation at the St. Paul Seminary. And I'd love for him to tell you how that happened. But anyway, he has been also on the visiting faculty for the seminarian program, in Omaha, the Institute for Priestly Formation, Creighton University, and the Seminary Formation Council training program for formators of seminarians at St. Vincent de Paul Seminary in Boynton Beach. He has conducted seminars in human formation for presbyteral assemblies and various seminaries throughout the U.S. and even Ireland. Dr. Ruff and Dunia Ruff, his wife of 42 years, have 4 adult children, and at last count, 4 grandchildren. Maybe you can update us. I don't know.
I'll just ask you to pray for more.
Okay. So, Dr. Ruff, please come forward. Let's welcome him.
Thank you for that introduction and for giving me my doctorate. I have been given a doctorate and ordained over the years. I've been Father Ruff and Dr. Ruff. I have an MA, which in Minnesota used to be, if you passed the doctoral exam, you could still be a psychologist. So I'll just do one correction.
Okay.
People still like to call me doctor because they don't want to call me master. Doctor. So yes, pray for more grandchildren. My mother had 35. I've got 4. This is a bad showing. More than this. So she had 8 children. So that makes some of the difference. Well, I'll talk a little bit about how I did end up at the seminary, since you set that up, and then what we're doing there, and just the joy it's been for me to be there. But first of all, thank all of you for the support you give to seminaries and seminarians, and to our future priests. Once the men end up on the most wanted poster that they have around all the churches, often they end up being idealized. And so please do your seminarians the favor of not idealizing them. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Or not saying, boy, you go to church every day, so you must have it all together. No. People come to the seminary like they come to everywhere in the world, like they come into marriage, with sets of problems. And I think one of the beauties is we're starting to acknowledge that as a church, and then actually help people step into the work they need to do some healing with that. So years ago, 12 years ago, we went through a dark time in the diocese where we went through our bankruptcy time, all the lawsuits were coming up, the statute of limitations had been lifted. And I looked around at the work we were doing at the seminary, and even my own work, and thought, we're not making an adequate response to the needs these men have. Where have I failed? Where have we failed? And at the time, there was no psychologist or therapist at the seminary. So I met with a couple of the priests and said, you really should have a therapist there. This is not like me at all, by the way. I'm usually pretty reticent. You should have a therapist there, and if you create a position and offer it to me, I'll probably take it. So that was the beginning of a 10-year journey there in building a program. When I arrived, they showed me a very nice office that I had at the end of the hall. And I said, is there like a waiting room? And it was a chair at the end of the administrative building. So whoever's sitting there to see Paul Ruff is in full public display. And I thought, boy, I didn't know if transferring from my private practice, which was very private, this is very public, how would it work? It's one of the best things that has happened. Everybody knows everybody goes to see a counselor sometime. I'll have priests who come into the seminary to see me, and I'll say, if you want privacy, I can bring you in the back door to my office. And they'll say, no, it's good the guys know that we need this too. So I've had priests come in, I've had bishops come in, and I'll walk down the hall with somebody and say, what are you here for? Oh, some mental health stuff with Ruff. Isn't that beautiful, though?
Yeah.
Isn't it beautiful? You get to just do that. You get to be a priest and have problems and need different kinds of assistance. This doesn't take the place of the spiritual assistance they need. But the spiritual assistance also doesn't take place of this need for psychological healing. There's a different set of gifts. I work very closely with the spiritual directors, and the head of that department, Father Vanderploeg's a dear friend of mine. We have a lot of respect for what's the angle we each get to come in with, to a man with in terms of his healing and his growth. So I've got a lot of gratitude for the room I've been given. When I started, I said, I don't want a job description because we don't know what the job is yet. And Monsignor Callahan at the time was fine with that. So it's kind of evolved over the years. Most of my time is spent seeing seminarians individually. Probably 10% goes to seeing priests from outside of the seminary. I do some training with formators at the seminary, including your son, Evan, who's been a delight as a formator. And I think what's happened over time in the church and at our seminary in particular, and I've had a hand in this, I've been told, is we just get to acknowledge our humanness to each other. And people get to talk about the needs they have, the fears they have. Years ago, I was at a conference at the very beginning with some of the formators in Denver that was put on by IPF to train formators before we had any program for that. Formators are the man who walks with the man through his formation process. He's not a spiritual director, but he kind of keeps track of his goals for growth and how that growth is progressing. So one of the formators at that meeting came up to me and said, I get physically sick because I am so worried about doing a very important job I am not yet trained to do. Mm-hmm. And he was a sturdy guy, ex-military guy. But he said, I need to admit it. I just need to sit. Would you do training with us? And so I was moved to want to do that. And I told Monsignor Callahan, the rector, would that be okay? And he's the boss, so Monsignor and I had a playful relationship. He said, well, you can do that, but I get to sit in on the training with these guys. And I said, you can come anytime you want. It just won't be effective while you're there. Because we're trying to invite people to be vulnerable, and you're the boss. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's different roles. So, and he was very willing to honor that. And he could come in anytime. And he did come in one time. And we just talked about what we were doing. So I want to talk a little bit, one more acknowledgement. Father Taphorn has been just a delight as a rector and very dedicated to what we're doing with mental health services and counseling services at the seminary. I was meeting with a group of psychologists nationally yesterday. We have a Zoom meeting we've set up between us who work in seminaries around the country. I think we are better equipped at our seminary than anywhere else to be able to meet the actual need because it's been funded. We have right now 5 different therapists who are partially contracted with us, which equals about 2.2 full-time equivalent for 106 men. We do teaching, we do consultation, we do counseling, we do ongoing formation work. So there's a lot of hats we wear, and we've been very well used. Nobody has time on their hands in that group. Everybody's very well used. So Father Taphorn has had a real support for this vision. He did say to me recently, people didn't used to have all this counseling in seminaries. And I said, yeah, I know, and it turned out just great. He said, well, there is that. He used to work in the Aspen office down in Omaha, so he had to handle a lot of the things that didn't turn out good. Now, it doesn't mean everything's going to turn out great because there's therapists on board. We will miss some things. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We will miss some things. But I think there's an opportunity there and an attitude that men are supposed to and privileged to take care of the needs that they actually have. One of our very good seminarians ordained 4 years ago on his way out, and I was the only therapist there at the time. He said, do you realize there's some guys in our class who never saw Ruff? It used to be weird to see a counselor. Now it was weird never to see one. Like, what's that? Any of you raised problem-free kids? Grandkids? So the idea that they can have one meeting with me. Some guys who've gone through a lot of crap in their life get to do 3 years of work. Not every week, but with some recurrence. They came from a broken family. They never had a father. I get to be part of the dad for a while. They get to have an attachment where they sort themselves out as men over time. It's not just fix a problem. It's help a person heal. That distinction makes sense? And I'm very interested in the healing process much more than the fixing process. So what are some of the needs that we see in the current generation? There's a lot made of the mental health needs of this generation right now that we're facing, Gen Z, and then there's other alphabets after that. Now, 2 out of 5 currently report clinical symptoms of anxiety. That's pretty high. Some of them are reporting symptoms at the rate that in the 50s people would have been hospitalized with. And they're going through day-to-day life with these. Now, I think there really is a raising of the level of symptomology. I think there's also a raising of the willingness to admit that you have it. That makes sense? You know, in my office, I don't let them use the F word, which is fine. How are you doing? Fine. Okay, that doesn't tell me anything. What's going on? No, I'm fine. Yeah. There's a really bad acronym I won't tell you about what fine means for the people at AA. So 2 out of 5 are reporting clinical symptoms of anxiety. 1 in 3 with reporting depression or persistent sadness and hopelessness. And this isn't seminarians I'm talking about, this is the general population they're coming out of, and they're part of it. 80% are more likely to report or endorse symptoms than their prior generation. General measures of resiliency are down with each successive generation since World War II. Now, part of that is we're not willing just to numb out and push through, but being able to push through is actually a good thing. We don't want to spend all our time looking at, poor me, I have a problem and I got hurt. So part of what we need to do is equipping resiliency, but also helping heal where things are wounded, where they need to be able to step out, make mistakes, take risks, do dangerous things. I'll give a dangerous thing story. My wife's from Guatemala. There's always travel advisors and advisories not to go, and we always go visit family there. And we were there with all of our children and grandchildren last year, somewhere before this one. And at one point, we're at the farm going up this sort of rutted and rocky road in a pickup, and my grandkids, ages 4 to 8, are standing up in the back of the pickup as we go up the mountain. We're all circled around them. But I thought, this is so non-Minnesotan. And my granddaughter, who's got a little bit of ADD and a lot of spark to her, she says, we're doing dangerous things. People have not been allowed to do enough dangerous things sometimes, to sort of risk themselves, to venture themselves for a good thing. In our propedeutic program, the preparatory program now, one of the things that happens is the month of January, they're given a bus ticket to a mission somewhere, and they go live there with the homeless or the street people and the staff that are serving them. And they don't bring cell phones, and they just make do. They don't bring money. So this is an old Jesuit practice that we've adopted, and the guys love it, partly because they're doing dangerous things that are really good. It takes them out of their comfort zone. That builds resiliency for ministry. So back to what are the dilemmas we're facing? Less connection in communities, less playtime, more escape from stress activities. The cell phone, if I have a bad feeling, I can just check a news feed. I can just offload anytime I want. Or if I've got this, guys are exposed to pornography between the ages of 8 and 12 generally, and girls too, first exposure. That's a trauma. Trauma creates a cycle of recurrence. I don't know if people know that. When there's a trauma, people often go back and say, what was that? What was that? Well, I deal with the guys and I say, most of you have been sexually abused by the porn industry. Because something snuck into your house, exposed you to this, at a time you had no idea what to do with it, excited you, scared you, and made you feel ashamed. And of course, you told your parents, right? No. Okay, they told you to keep a secret too. All the signs of what an abuser does. Isn't that something? So here we are, guys locked into this. No wonder there's habits that develop with nobody to really shepherd them through it very well. And this becomes a way, if I have a depressed feeling, I could look at my phone, whether it's just looking at cat videos or untoward things or sports scores. You know, there's constant distraction away from being able to feel and deal with what's happening outside. So I think that's part of the decline in resilience. For our priests, there's less time in community. Their development as priests goes from being an associate for a year or two to being a pastor. and being alone as a pastor. Dr. Cooper and I were just talking about this a little bit ago, and one of the messages priests often say is we're too busy. Say that to a person who's raised 7 children. We just say, you think you're busy. My life is nonstop. The thing that I think they actually need to learn to say, because it's the deeper truth, I'm too lonely. I've got too much responsibility, and I'm carrying it alone, and there's not a person to talk to. So priests do come in with some frequency for counseling. And one of the things I've done with ongoing formation is start a month-long program called the Priestly Renewal Program. We've had our first take on that 2 years ago. 9 priests came. It's a month of real hospitality, rest, recreation. They prepare for an 8-day silent retreat for 5 days. They have an 8-day silent retreat. And then we get to do some very deep work in human growth, healing, and formation that they work on as brothers with each other. They get to talk about things they've carried privately and be cared about and loved by brothers in it. And then we work on how do you take this back into ministry for a week of pastoral formation. It was a beautiful time. Even priests who had been very alienated from each other ended up being very eternally connected. One of them said to 2 of the others, I didn't want to come because you were here. We were in seminary together. I did not like you at all. And he said, I'm so glad we're here as brothers. As we were sitting around having a barbecue at night, just kind of impromptu as a group. But think about the loneliness, and I'm going to try to help priests learn to say, I'm too lonely. Because it's a deep human truth. Jesus didn't send people out one at a time. He sent them out 2 by 2. There's a reason for that. Okay, so some of the issues I see are often anxiety, perfectionism, scrupulosity, which is a form of anxiety. We call it OCD. We put a Christian frame on it, it's scrupulosity. So guys trying to perfect themselves all the time. We're thinking they need to be perfect. Comparison of self negatively, isolation, often too much sort of being turned into the poster boy of the seminary, more than becoming the man they need to be. And I don't mean they can't be a seminarian in that, but it's maybe they went from a very beautiful homeschooled family to minor seminary to us, and they didn't bump into the world yet. And so I really want guys. One guy said at one point, who was having difficulty at the seminary, do you think I should leave and maybe take a pastoral year? And I said, no, I think you should leave and go work in an industry where no one really gives a rip that you're a seminarian for a year. Do that. Work construction. Do something like that. And he ended up doing that. He did a roofing job. It was very, very good for him. So we can a little too much pamper sometimes seminary and want them to be our perfect seminary. The reason I call it a wanted poster, once a guy's on it, it's an act of shame to leave the seminary. I think that's just unjust. That's just unjust. It's good that we have a pray for them, pray for their discernment, whichever way they go. But yeah, please don't idealize anybody, because it's a trap, including my kids. I've often said to the seminarians when we try to talk about family problems. Any of you have families without problems? So when we talk about family problems, including parents, and they say, my family was, the F word, fine, and we had no problem. And I'm sure my parents did the best they could. I always say to them, I hope my kids never say that about me, because then I wasted going to confession. I mean, who's doing the best they could all the time? Now, it's judgmental to say that they did the best they could. It's okay for us to be human with each other, including our priests. So, in my practice, in the morning, guys are in classes. Afternoons, they're seeing their spiritual directors, their formators, people like myself. I would say the utilization rate, the guys do a very thorough psychological assessment outside of the seminary that's sent to our admissions team. We help look at that as psychologists, and then along with lay people, priests on staff, we're part of an admissions committee to screen things on the front end. We seldom see a problem-free candidate. Everybody's got something. So we try to flag goals. Here's some things to work on. We also take in some people who would say, this guy's marginal in terms of admission. We have to keep an eye on this. I was out in I was the facilitator for a conference at the McGrath Institute in Notre Dame in September. So it was formators, spiritual directors, psychologists from around the country talking about the current status of seminarians. And we are only supposed to do in a seminary what they call growth counseling, which means things are pretty much fine. We're just helping with growth. And as therapists, we said with one voice, please quit calling it that. We're doing psychotherapy. We're doing counseling. We're doing therapy with people because they come in with wounds and they get to have those. And if you don't want us to do that work, do not admit the men who have problems. And then you get a seminary that has probably 20% of its population. Because guys come in with a history of pornography struggles, which is pretty ubiquitous now, and a very hard habit to break. We've got one therapist on staff who does just working with sort of addiction cycle stuff with guys on there. And he's got 3 groups of guys that want to work on, I just really want to get more freedom than I've gotten for myself. Does that sound scandalous to you? No, it's just real. We have an anxiety group running where we teach them how to manage those kind of things. In the propedeutic year, with the preparatory year, and now at the main house, we have groups where men get together and just talk about themselves and their dilemmas. And they talk to each other about it. And I facilitate, but it's really to help them turn towards their brothers and be able to say, I still carry wounds from back in junior high when I got bullied. And they go into shame. And I say, can you look around the room and see the faces with you? Nobody's ashamed of me. They get to be relieved of that. One fellow had a very tragic death of a parent as he was there at the beginning of the year. He was in the group I was running at the preparatory year. And he's talked about this publicly. His father had suicided, different dioceses. And as he's gone, my group is doing this beautiful job as a group of men saying, how do we welcome him back? And they said, we have to talk to him, but not too much. We don't want to crowd him because he's kind of private. We don't want to stand too far because he'd let a brother into a place he thought he should just shield for himself. So it's really privileged work to watch how God works in this and how he works through the men as brothers and how I get to be a player in that, not the driver of it. A terrific group of therapists, diverse skills now, Dr. Daniel McClure, Krista Masick, soon-to-be Dr. Angie Newman, Christian Wolf, really, really skilled people in collaboration. We get together once every semester just to spend an offsite day building our own team. Really good receptivity from the formators and spiritual directors. Part of the job, too, I think, is just being in the milieu. We get to be a part of the community and see what's happening there and speak into it. One of my main tasks that I took on, it's not part of a job description, but later it was acknowledged by several people, is just to go around and say to staff, how are you doing? How's it going? What are you noticing about our men? How are we all part of a formation family together? Not just all people with tasked different things. We're part of a community that's formative for each other. So how are we all doing? And if I saw somebody do something beautiful with the man, I would go to them the next day and say, I heard about this thing you did. That was so cool. That was so on track. You just see something spinning the right direction and you just tap it. And that person gets to be affirmed. They get to realize the gift they are. We get to show up as a family, which is what Christ calls us into. We get to show up as part of the body of Christ, and we are all affecting each other. I'm very much drawn into growth spiritually and humanly by the work I get to do with these guys. They're a brave group of men. And the priests are a generous group of people, and the staff, it's really an exceptional group of people overall. And the more we can acknowledge that with each other, the gift that each person is, the more we're actually helping form. And think about if we do that in a seminary family, we are training a priest. You need to do that with your staff. We're not all functionaries. We're all human beings who are playing a role in contributing to a mission. And so I think that training, just the training of the milieu, is as important in many, many ways as coming in for counseling sessions. Does that make sense? And I think as therapists, we're trained to be systems people. We're trained to family systems, internal systems. So we kind of look around, how's this system functioning? Where is it stuck? And we try to maybe tap it in the right direction when we can there. Few minutes left. I want to take a few questions. Let me just touch on a couple of pieces, then we'll go on. So the results I see, and the men report, and the priests are very much a part of building this too. When I first came to the seminary, I walked down the hall and people wouldn't quite look at each other. It felt so weird to me. And if there was a conflict, people would just avoid it. You know, Monsignor knows I tell this story. He used to be kind of a blow-up guy, our old rector, Monsignor Callahan, who did many, many beautiful things at the seminary. And I'd be in meetings with staff and they'd say, well, we can't bring up that idea, Monsignor will blow up. I thought, that's a crazy idea. And this happened like in 3 meetings. Finally, I knocked on his door and said, Monsignor, can I talk with you? And he said, yeah. I said, I'm in these meetings with these really competent people, and they say not to bring up some of our best ideas because you'd blow up. Why is you blowing up like interesting? He said, I don't know. I said, me neither. I don't get it. I mean, if you decide to blow up at me, I'm just going to think you're behaving badly, but we can work that out. So he was fine. He said, yeah, we can work that out. He said, I've had to do that with people. They blow up at me. We work it out. So if you think about that as a community, who's creating the problem? The people who are avoiding or the people blowing up? They both are. Avoiders, and I'm naturally more of an avoider. I just can't stand to do it anymore because it makes me sick. But I would be more naturally a reticent person. But to be able to say, oh, conflicts are a good thing because they help us build something as a team. Conflicts in a marriage are a good thing if we're willing to step into them, be humble enough to learn, and grow closer through them. So having a culture that we develop too, where conflict gets to be there. People get to, I sponsor some talks in our sort of bar area once a semester, and I try to give it a controversial title. Last semester was, what's the use of complaining anyway? Which is kind of what seminarians say, because it's hopeless and we have them prisoner. And I do tell them about Viktor Frankl, and he managed them. But part of what I wanted to get at is who doesn't complain, but how do we make our complaints something useful? How do we bring it into community? How do we help that be part of human growth? Not stop at the level of gossip with each other. I see people much more now embracing a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. And growth mindset is life is a series of challenges that invite me to take another step to become larger and bigger and more equipped. A fixed mindset is, I hope they don't see I have any problems. And I hope I never have to run into problems. And if I run into an obstacle, I should just go the other way. So people being willing to embrace challenge and growth, that's part of building that resiliency that's often missing. Part of building resiliency too is if I have a problem I don't know how to deal with, I get to ask for help. Mm-hmm. It used to be a guy was sent for counseling if he had problems. Now, if a guy doesn't know he has problems, we'd probably send him to counseling. Because you have problems. I have a seminar course, Theo 1, that's for kind of human formation. And I wanted to make the title, but I thought it would go south for some people. What's your problem anyway? And if by the end of it you don't know what your problems are, you're not really engaged in formation. You know, what are your strengths, certainly, but also what are the problems? I see a decrease of hiding and denial about problems. Even talking about struggles with integrating their mature sexuality. The formators used to always not even ask about that, which is abandoning. And that was talked, I won't go into the canonical, but that was internal form. That's a confessional matter. No, it's not. I mean, your anger is a communal matter, your sexuality is a communal matter. These are human things. One formator asked one of his guys, so how's it going with chastity? And he came back with his eyes just like saucers. He said, he told me everything about his history. What do I do? So part of what we're trying to do is not pry into a man's privacy, but accompany him in his growth. And a father asks people how they're doing. And he leaves room for problems. And he stays with the guy who's having a problem, and they get to walk together sort of in rational, calm ways to say, wow, that sounds like a lot of things that have been confusing. Let's figure that out together. And let's help you get the resources you need. Okay. And there's increased, as a man has increased capacity to understand his own dilemmas in life and experience some healing, he gets to carry more hope and more capacity to greet other people in their dilemmas and their healing. The things in me that I want to pretend aren't there are the things in you I won't want to tend to. Does that make sense? If I've never dealt with my own anxiety and I'm working with you and you start to get anxious, I'll think, well, I better back off. Instead of saying, oh, anxiety, it looks like there's some anxiety about that. We get to include the problem, not work around it with each other. Not that the priests are going to be psychologists, but they are going to be healers. And they need to understand this dimension of human healing, and then when to refer it to a psychologist or to a doctor or whatever might be needed. But I think it enlarges their vision for what gets to be included in human experience, because they've included more of their own human experience. Okay. So I think I'll leave it there. So again, thank you for your support. I hope I said nothing today that scandalizes you, and it looks like I haven't. I've mostly just seen grandparents' looks of nods and recognition. Like, yep, we run into all of this. So have a heart for these guys. Please don't put them on pedestals. That's mean. Just don't do that to people. Priests either, don't put them on pedestals. And when they say they're too busy, start to hear, I wonder if they're too lonely. Because if we're not lonely, we can do a whole lot of stuff. As married people, we're busy all the time. Busy has almost become a virtue. It's actually a vice. So don't let that be the thing people hide behind. Welcome your priests around. Know that they need some nurture and care. And the seminarians, be excited about their capacity to grow, not about how wonderful they are. But that's a growth mindset. Questions for me, though?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm from the Diocese of Lafayette in Indiana, and we've got guys there's a couple from my parish already at St.
Yeah.
Paul. So I'm really pleased with what you're doing with them as far as their mental health. What happens, though, when they come back?
Yeah, that's a
Do
great
you do?
question.
I mean, do you give them resources at home?
We do in our diocese, but I don't know that we can do a whole lot to build, or that I don't think we've done much to build the support back there. That's really the job of their vicar and their bishop.
Do you tell their bishop and
Yes, I was out there last year. I do tell them. Yes, no, I do.
No, you can tell.
And you tell them too. And there are, some bishops too are kind of nervous about being considered fathers.
Oh yeah.
And even because sometimes they're younger than the men who see them, but they need to be fathers.
Yeah.
I was talking to our archbishop once, and I said, we were doing a retreat together. I said, I'm going to use father language with you. And I know it makes you a little uneasy, I think, but I'm going to do it not to honor you, but to oblige you. You're a father. I'm not worthy to be a father, and somehow I was a father. You're not worthy to be a father, I imagine, in various ways, but you are the father. So we both have to do father. And these guys need you to be one. So I think the more we can support our bishops are very lonely people. They're very lonely people. They have trouble having community with each other. They have trouble sort of leaning into their own needs. There's more meltdowns going on with bishops now, just in terms of leaving. So, but I do think loneliness is a real key piece to this. Loneliness and increased pressure in the community. Yes?
There are some priests in our archdiocese, we understand, that live together in intentional communities, small communities, to deal with some of the issues that you've discussed here. To what extent is that a phenomenon, and what is the Archbishop's policy on that? Is it encouraged? Is it growing?
Are you talking about in this diocese?
Yes.
He's very supportive of what the companions are doing. And then there's an oratory as well that he's very supportive of. So I think those initiatives, he's very supportive of. I think in some dioceses, they're trying to sort of make that more programmatic, that priests will close up some of the parishes, priests will live in clusters together to serve. I think in the long run, that'll be a better way to go. It's going to have hiccups along the way when you make it programmatic. But I think to make it invitational and to sort of cultivate that, we could do more at the seminary in cultivating that. How do you take this when you go? I'll have a guy say, boy, so-and-so is my friend here, and I hope we stay in touch. I said, tell me about what it means to hope you stay in touch. What do you mean? I said, like, do you plan to stay in touch? Oh. And I said, how often would you like to stay in touch? I'd like to be, our first year, call this guy in this other diocese because we're close friends. I'd like to call him every week. Might you tell him that? And they actually made a plan to do that. They called each other every week. So I think those things are important. I think we're still not thinking that model all the way through. In this diocese, there's a very rich office of ongoing formation, which I get to work a lot in for priests who are out there. But there's a long way to go because the priesthood's gone through such change with the decreased numbers, increased demand, and we haven't really adapted how to make that human in a full way, I think. Yes, please.
One of the things that Serrans do not only is promote vocations, but to encourage the priests that are already there.
Oh, great.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, he said not only are Serrans promoting vocations, but they want to support the priests who are already there.
Yes.
And so you understanding the needs of both the seminarians and when they become priests, what can we do to help them become priests and better priests?
Yeah, I think having people over for dinner is great. I think having discussions even with your bishop about that question, we really know that this is the priesthood's in a difficult spot. We want to support. What can we do here? He may not have an answer, but keep the question percolating. I don't know what avenues you'd have in your diocese for that. One of the things that I'm doing is this program for ongoing formation that's a month long. So bishops allowing that to happen was a big step. Because it's a guy a month. The Archbishop at first, when we proposed it, said, a month? I can't let guys go for a month. And I said, I don't think you can actually not let them go for a month. Another diocese said, in the same meeting, for the Winona Diocese, their vicar for religious, we let guys go for 3 months, but it's to treatment. I'd rather do this. This is a lot cheaper than treatment, I can tell you. So I think any initiatives that you see, but I would even just start the conversation. We know there's a need there. How are we addressing it in our diocese? Is there any way we as Serrans can support it? I would take that to the chancery. They'll love hearing that more than the complaint about your priest. They'll love hearing that. Yes?
Do you encourage or even facilitate, or does the bishop facilitate all the priests to be in like smaller groups that are accountable to one another and gather, at least once a month?
Yes, I would say it's definitely supported and encouraged that priests do that. There's not a way to make that happen. I've had priests approach me and say, my group doesn't go deep enough. We do kind of a superficial, because as guys, we like to be superficial. You know that. We like to just say, we're pretty much fine. We complain about this thing that happened with the business administrator. Yeah, I hate that. That happened to me too. So I did have one of the priests who came out of the program we did in Winona, and he said, I want my group to go deeper. And so I went in and facilitated just a couple times with them and set up I don't know that they're carrying it forward. I'm actually checking in with him today just to say, how's that going? Another priest who was on that program in the summer said, as companions, which is a very good group, we talk about fraternity. What we've done this month is deeper than anything I've done in my life. In terms of feeling really known, loved, and supported by brothers. Any way we can help that happen more, I think would be good. I'm kind of on a sabbatical now, and part of my mission is exactly that. How do we build out this more? Because I came to the seminary because I'd worked with priests saying we need to do better on the front end. And now I'm saying, well, we're sending seminarians into this world. We need to do better on that end too. Yeah. How do we help build that up in a way that's sustainable? A loving brotherhood that can have conflict, can work it out, can be a mission together. Yes, yes.
One of the most exciting things that I'm hearing from you this morning is that a young man that I knew as a seminarian is now one of your one of the men on your staff. That is
Daniel McClure.
a therapist.
Yes.
Dan McClure.
know
Yeah,
him
no,
too.
Daniel's been great.
Yes.
Daniel's been great.
I know him too.
Yeah, yeah. No, he's got that inside out look at things. In fact, Daniel, when he was leaving the seminary, he came to meet with me at my office, not as a client, but just to consult. And he said, "So I want to be a psychologist. I think. Where should I go?" I said, "There's a very good Catholic program out east. If I was a young man not too afraid of death, I'd go do that." And he did that. We've stayed in touch over the years since he left. It was great to have him come on. Good. Well, thank you. I think we're probably past our time a little bit.